sure how public I'm going to make this. I'll either send you the link or put it up on the website. So if you do want to look back at the video, you can. So chapter 3. So like I stated in the technique, we'll take a look at each page. We'll look at question by question. I'll make some comments on some things that I noticed patterns for. And then you guys can stop me and we can go through more detail. Welcome, Russ. We're just ready to get going here.
Okay.
Okay, so on the first page, number 1, you were supposed to circle the ones that are statements. And you can see that I only have 2 of those marked. I mean, the rest of those we just can't judge on because of definitions like F. It's cold in Bulgaria. That depends on what in the world does cold mean. And anyway, then H I want to make a comment on. This statement is true. Is what? Kind of self-defining. We have no way of judging that one. So anyway, that one was commonly picked. So when it comes to number 2, you were supposed to pull out your symbols and abbreviate the statements. So part A, he believes in Jesus and is baptized. J and B. Part B, an if-then statement. If your sons keep my covenant and the statutes I teach them, then their sons will sit on the throne forever. So if K, then S. I gave you an if and only if in part C, and an if and only if. You pretty much had to remember that double-sided arrow. Part D, I was really pleased at how well the class did on this. That's a perfect place for the exclusive or, because I said they can do one or the other, but not both. Perfect time for the circle with the plus sign in it. And I should make this comment. The ones I'm going to put a little asterisk. Those 3, the letters could be reversed. So in other words, for and, for the if and only if, and for the exclusive or, it doesn't matter which order. The other 2, the 2 conditional statements, they have to be in the order they're in. Anyway, the last one, salvation is necessary for baptism. The thing that's necessary is salvation. And I don't know if you probably didn't remember this, but the necessary part has to be on the receiving end of the arrow. The beginning part, that's the sufficient part. So that one has to be if B, then S. Anybody, as long as we've gone that far, any questions on numbers 1 and 2? That you would like maybe more detail on, or? Okay, let's go down to number 3. So you had to translate that into words. So the first one was pretty much straight translate. She is not an athlete, or she is on the dean's list. So that's just a matter of getting what the not symbol means and what the or symbol means. Now, part B, I gave you a negation of a quantity. And so this is what, De Morgan? So hopefully you were thinking like this. So De Morgan tells us that when you have a negation of a quantity, you negate both of the statements inside the parentheses, but you have to flip upside down the symbol. So it should be she is not an athlete or she is not on the dean's list. Most common error was right there. People put and there. Okay, number 4. Negations. This is probably the hardest part of the test. Just got a challenge there. So again, I go to Morgan's. You're supposed to negate an or statement. So the same deal. You got to negate each part. So instead of eating in the cafeteria, I will not eat in the cafeteria. Instead of getting a snack in the Warrior Underground, I will not. But the key thing is the word or has to be changed to and. Here's another challenging one, part B. If I study, my test grade will improve. What's the only thing that will make an if-then statement false? If the first part's true and the second part's false. So you could have stated it like I did. If I study, my test grade will not improve. Or you can leave the if out and just say, I studied and my test grade did not improve. So keep that first part true and the second part false, and you've got it. C was easy. English is not a precise language. D, well, if you're negating all seniors are graduating, you're saying there's at least one that is not. So at least one senior is not graduating. Some juniors are residents? None. No juniors are resident. I had, yeah. Anyway, F, no sophomores are taking introductory art? There's at least one that is. And F, and then G is De Morgan again. She did well on the exam and got a good final grade. So when you negate that, here, she did well on the exam and got a good final grade. So when you negate it, you should get she did not do well on the exam or did not get the final grade. So most common problem right there. So again, pause time. If I went too fast, let me know. Further explanation or comments or questions, let them go. We're on anything on the first page now. All right, I'm going to move to page 2 then. So page 2 started off with this true false. I'm sorry, this multiple choice. And there, you probably noticed there were 5 problems and 4 choices. I'm sorry, there were 5 choices, but 2 of them were identical. If you look closely, the A column and the D column were both TTFT, so they could have been used interchangeably. So if you notice in my answers, in the top answer, A, I put in parentheses D, either one. Second answer down, P and Q, that was column B. Third column down, either D or A, or P or not Q. P exclusive or Q, that's column C. And P if and only if Q, that was column E. So those are just 1 point each. Our first truth table, I mean, as you can tell, I didn't fill all the cells up, and you didn't have to. Those were just there as a workspace, depending on your style. You can see I made a couple extra columns here too by just putting some lines in. So it doesn't matter. So we've got our standard setup we only have 2 letters, so 4 rows. And then I threw in the not P and the not Q because they were needed. So the final answer is this circled column here. I also, check that you set up the table correctly and that you especially got what? I would say these 2, that you had those 2 rows also correct. So the final result here, FTFT. 4 points. So if you've got a minus here, it means I tried to give you some points for as far as you've got. I could not, maybe, possibly, I didn't give you all. If you don't have anything red written here, it means you got full credit. So number 7, another truth table. This one turned out to be a tautology, which is pretty unusual. And therefore, by the way, that whole first thing implies not Q. But I didn't really ask you that question because it's an if-then, and it turned out to a tautology. But anyway, I was checking. Did you? Well, I did. I checked everything. Did you set up the table correctly with 2 letters? Did you do this? This first correctly. Here was the key. A lot of people had a little trouble here because I think that was the one that wasn't in the book, and there were a number of errors when it came to that exclusive or. Anyway, final result, tautology. 4 points again on the number 8. Scroll up. Okay, number 8. Well, it turns out, here's another De Morgan question. When you do B, when you use De Morgan here, this becomes not P or Q because you have to, you have to inverse, you have to have to negate both, and then you got to flip the sign. And if you notice, that's the one that's identical. So the correct answer is choice B. So number 9. Why is that true? Because the if statement is false. And I don't know if you remember whenever an if-then begins with a false, it's guaranteed to be true. It turns out they're both false, right? So if false, then false. That's from your truth table rule about if-then, that should be true. Number 10. So this was if you could, if you remembered your rewriting techniques. We had a lesson on that. The converse is when you take the if and the then and switch them. Now, common error made in question 10A. I had people do this, say, see, how did they say that? You are my treasured possession if you obeyed me. They thought by putting the if you obeyed me at the end of the sentence, they had reversed it. But what you need to reverse is what's on the if and what's on the then. So originally, obeying is on the if side. You notice in mine, it's on the then. That's what you have to do. And over here, the then, you will be my treasured possession. That's the if. So yeah, English is a tricky thing. So when you say, you will be my treasured possession if you obey me, you haven't changed anything. I mean, yes, you changed words around, but logically, you haven't changed anything. On the inverse, you leave them in the same order and you negate them all. So that was a little bit easier. If you don't obey me, then you're not treasured possession. On the contrapositive, you have to switch them around and negate them both. So if you are not my treasured possession, then you don't or did not obey me. And then the extra credit part of this one was, how do you negate an if-then statement? Keep the first part true and negate the second. So if you obey me, then you won't be my treasured possession, or you obeyed me and you won't be my treasured possession. So if you had D right, I put a +1 there. If you had it wrong, I might have put a line there, but I didn't take anything off. So that's enough doing an awful lot of drawing here, but I'm trying to hit the big points that I noticed. When you correct these things all in a bunch, you start seeing some patterns come out. So let's just go back. So from question the second page then, anything?
What's the rule on the exclusive or again? It's only true when, or it's only false when? What is the exact rule on it?
True only when they're different. So for example, here, if you look on this line, right? So right here, this is my column in number 7. The column under my arrow is the one with the exclusive or. And you look at the 2 on either side. So true only when they're different. Well, this true and true are alike. That's why it's false. What did I do wrong? That one should be true. Now, what is goofed up there? It looks like I've got that wrong. Okay, anyway, the rule is true only when they're different. So this should be false. This should be true because they're different. This should be false because they're alike. And this should be false because they are alike. So I can see the answer key was wrong there. Is that what you were noticing, Russ?
No, I was just making sure I understood the rule. I didn't notice any of that, but that's.
So in other words, let's see. Yeah. So it's the same. It's the same as a regular or, except you can't have both truths. So either one can be true, but you can't have both true. So this last line down here, that has to be a false. That should have been a false. And this one here should have been a true. So it should be FTFF is the way it's supposed to read in that column. And until you just maybe go through it, let me see. Did I do it to the right ones? Yeah, I'm supposed to take that. Oh no, I take that back. Let me erase. Let me go back. I see what the problem is. I didn't do it with. I'm supposed to do it with Q. So it's correct. So here's what I'm doing it with. I'm doing it with this guy and this guy. Oh, I have the naughty there. It's supposed to be with Q. There we go. Right? If P then Q is exclusive ORed with Q. Okay, now let's do it. So they're alike. So you can't have that. That's false. In the second line, they're alike. We can't have that. They're false. In the third line, they're alike. You can't have that, so it's false. And in this line, false and true. Yeah, that's good. So my answer was correct. I was looking in the wrong spot. So FFFT for that part. And then that wasn't the last step. The last step, now I had to take this result and if it with not Q, and then you come up with the tautology. So once again, Russ, the rule, true only when they're different. Okay, other questions on page 2?
Can you just scroll up a little so we could see the bottom of 10?
The bottom of 10.
Pardon me, scroll down. Yeah,
I got it. I'm sorry. I got it.
a little bit more.
I can't go any farther.
Oh,
Wait. I figured maybe I can. There you go.
oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, got it.
Great. Yeah, I didn't say hello to you. You must have come in after I started. Susan, welcome. And Elliot, welcome to you. All right.
Thank you.
That's page 2. Time to move to, are there any other questions on page 2? Okay, let's go to the 3rd page. Yeah, this is the one that had everybody scratching their noggins. But we did do one like this in the book. Anyway, so you're supposed to find the implications. Key word right here. An implication is an if-then statement that turns out to a tautology. So what you had to do is take these 5 statements. When we did the one in the book, they gave us what? They gave us 3 statements in the book, but otherwise the same kind of problem. So here I gave you 5, and you had to find all the implications. So you had to try if-thening. I left you just enough columns to try all the combinations. Kind of tiny, but that first column, if A, then B. And then if A, then C. If A, then D. If A, then E. Well, that's it for all the ones that begin in A. Then I did all the ones that begin with B. If B, then A. If B, then C. If B, then D. If B, then E. You know, and so forth until you got... Okay, so I left you just enough columns. Then you'll notice I did truth tables. And whenever I came up with a false, I quit. Because it's supposed to be a tautology, and of course it can't be a tautology if there's any false. So you'll notice we did hit pay dirt here, and so two of those turned out, and I've identified them up here, and you notice I promoted them with the symbol. Therefore, B implies D and E implies C. Why? Because their if-then statements for those 2 turned out to be a tautology. So that was number 11. Number 12. Yeah, this didn't go as well as I thought it would have. Some of you nailed this and others, I don't know. So anyway, number 12. If the game is televised, then people will watch the game. Now you can use, I don't care what letters you use. I happen to use T for if the game is televised, and I happen to use W for they will watch the game. Here's what's important. Whatever you choose for the if, it has to be in the inside circle. So the if, the televised, has to be inside of the W circle. A lot of you had that reversed. And then, okay, well, by the way, this is a 2-pointer, and here was my grading scheme here. I gave 1 point for the validity and 1 point for the diagram. So some of you got the diagram wrong, but still got the validity right, and then it would be a minus, you know what I mean? Or some of you got the diagram right and got the validity wrong, whatever. So anyway, here's why it's invalid. Because when you add the second premise that the game is not televised, you notice I put 2 X's, both outside the televised circle. Is it true that people will not watch the game? Well, it is on this outer one here. There it's true they won't watch, but it sure isn't true when you pick that one. So it's invalid. So that was the idea for number 12. 13, if the cat's in the room, then the mice are hiding. I used R for the cats in the room. you can see, don't care matter again. And the mice are hiding, I used H. So the if part has to be in the inside again. So in my case, R had to be inside of H. The second premise is the mice are not hiding. So the X is only out here on the very outside now. You can already see it's not, I can't put it in two different places. So is it true that that is not in the room? It certainly appears good on the diagram. That is a valid argument.
Can I ask a question about those two?
Yeah.
My diagrams look just like yours, and I got invalid for, or invalid for 12, invalid for 13, and you marked me -1 for both.
Yeah, it probably was your diagram.
But the diagrams are exactly like yours, though, just have different letters.
Yeah, but do you have the if part in the inside?
I'll show them to you on Wednesday. We can compare notes, but they look.
Well, I don't care what letter did you use for the F.
So for 12, I used G for the big circle, and I used W for the little one. And I put an X on the inside of G. Huh?
No, see, that's what's wrong. If you use G for the game is televised, that has to be inside because it's the if part. The if part has to be in the inner. And I don't care that you use G, that's fine, but you can't have W on the inside. That's the then. So you got a point because you got your invalid correct, but you didn't have your diagram correct.
Okay.
And I don't remember, is that possibly what happened on 13 also?
Yeah, the same thing.
Okay. So it's kind of confusing. 1 point I counted for the diagram, 1 point for the argument. Anyway, 14 is the same as 13, so it should be valid. And it is. Again, this totally depends on your coding. If you use my system, then it would look like you see here. It was pretty simple for a truth table because there was only one row where all the statement, where the entire row was, where both premises were true, and that's that bottom row. And there's a true conclusion there. So these are in agreement, and they should be. They're the same problem. So because it was a truth table, it took more to you had to do more work there. That's why that was a 4-pointer. Again, I gave some points if you set up the table right, if you had columns for your premises and your conclusion and all that kind of stuff. So, questions on page, where are we? 3. Well, let's go to 4. So the last page was these switching network wiring diagrams. And the top two there for 15, each one was worth 2 points. Let's see. I don't know what you want me to say on that, but the R and the S, they're being ORed, so that has to be a stack. So you can see we have a stack here. And that stack is, and by the way, why did I start with that? Because it's in the innermost part of the parentheses. And then that's ANDed with Q, so it has to be side by side with Q. And then all of that is ORed with P. So all of this has to be stacked with P. So that's why I stuck a P on the top. It doesn't matter if the P is on the bottom, but on part B, You got a P or Q, so that's a stack. You got an S and T, so that's a side by side, and then those two are in turn stacked. So stack over side by side, stacked. Something to that effect. It doesn't have to be it exactly. You could have had these sides coming straight down, you know, all the way like this, but just a different style. I didn't take, you know, that would have been fine. Uh, 16 was extra credit, and a bunch of you got it. And I pretty much laid this out as a big fat clue to you before the test, that if I did give you an if-then, remember, you got this wonderful hint over here, which I wrote out on the test here. And so even though you had an if-then, you could switch it over to an or, but you had to be tricky. You had to change it over to the opposite of the first. So the opposite of not P is P. And you had to use the same as Q, so that stays as not Q. So this was the trickiest part right there. Anyway, those are ORed, so they're stacked. And that's stacked with Q, and that's stacked with another stack. So it's like one big thrilling stack. And then at the very end, side by side with a Q. So a number of you had +3 there. And I think I had some others that had partial extra credit there. So anyway, that was nice. You guys took the hint about the hint quite well. So anyway, then the idea was to count up the minuses and subtract. If you did have, you know, we had what? You had 2 opportunities for extra credit. You had this number 16 had extra credit, and then back, what was it, on page 2? Page 2, there was extra credit on 10D. So you did have a possibility for 4. Anyway, I added up all the negatives. I subtracted the extra credits. And that should have given me on the front page of your test a minus number. And, you know, if you had a -3, for example, because there were 59 points, that meant you had 56 out of 59. And then I figured out a percent. And that's how I got the grade. Now, what this does, you know, what your tests that I sent you do not show, and I never do show it on the test. I don't show the notebook extra credit on there, but in the grade book, I do. Of course, the grade book is where it counts. So I like to leave the test show the score you got on the test. But when it comes to the grade book, if you check on my Moodle, if you had extra credit points that came in that email on your notebook, then you should see that your test went up by that much. That is up to 100. So if you had a 98 and you had a +5, yeah, you would get a 100. But I don't know. Anyway, what else can I talk to you about regarding anything else on the test? And I appreciate the questions you're asking, because, you know, this is one of our chief study documents as we this week get ready for the final. Normally we have 3. This time we're only going to have these 2 to look at. Anybody have are there other questions to ask? Well, then I guess there's no sense in prolonging the pain. We'll wrap it up. I'll give you your real test on Wednesday. Or I don't know if you printed these, but you can use the ones I sent you. Hopefully you were able to read them. Hopefully all of you got them. And then we'll study, and on we go. Anybody else? Anybody? Another chance? Speak up. All right. Thank you. Have a good couple days here. I'll see you on Wednesday. We're actually in a new month, huh?
Exactly.
Wow, that's going to be. I'm never sad when I leave February.
Have a good evening.
Thanks. You too. Good night.
Yep.
Right.